The world around you is full of people who act on impulse, react without thinking, and follow the loudest voices in the room. Imagine stepping into that world armed with the ability to influence outcomes, guide decisions, and create opportunities without anyone even realizing it. The skills you are about to learn are not about manipulation for selfish gain. They are about understanding human behavior deeply, knowing how minds work, and using that knowledge to inspire, lead, and achieve results. Every conversation, every interaction, every relationship becomes a chance to create impact when you know these principles. These are not tricks you read about casually. They are precise methods that, when applied with focus and integrity, make people naturally align with your vision, your goals, and your direction. This is about controlling situations silently, gaining trust, and achieving influence without force or conflict. By mastering these techniques, you step into a level of awareness and effectiveness that most people never reach. And the results you generate will reflect that mastery in every part of your life. The power to shape outcomes quietly, confidently, and consistently starts now. And once you commit to this, you will see the world respond in ways you never thought possible. Psychology 1, build trust first. All right, sit back, because I'm going to give you something that's deep, powerful, and long enough to shift the way you think about influence and control. Not about games or manipulation. It's about understanding human nature so clearly that people respond to you naturally, without pressure, without resistance, and without even realizing why. And the first and most important principle is trust. Everything rises and falls on trust. Without it, influence doesn't last. With it, you can build bonds so strong that people willingly follow your lead, listen to your words, and align with your vision. Think about the people you listen to in your own life. Maybe it's a teacher who always believed in you, a friend who never judged you, or a leader who spoke with honesty when others only told you what you wanted to hear. You didn't follow them because they demanded it. You followed because they earned your trust. That's where real control begins. Not with force, not with tricks, but with a foundation that people feel safe standing on. The truth is, trust doesn't come overnight. It's earned in small ways, through consistency, honesty, and authenticity. When you keep your word, when you show up the same way in private as you do in public, when you listen more than you speak, people begin to see that you are dependable. They begin to notice that you're not trying to take advantage of them. You're not just there for convenience, and you're not putting on an act. They sense that what you say has weight because your actions back it up. Influence works like gravity. The stronger your trust, the stronger your pull. People don't resist you because they feel drawn to you. They sense that being around you brings stability. And in a world where everyone is looking for someone they can believe in, someone they can rely on, being that person makes you stand out immediately. That's why so many people fail when they try to manipulate or use shallow tactics. They might succeed in the short term, but it never lasts. Without trust, influence is like a house of cards. It collapses with the first gust of doubt. You want to control silently? Build your reputation in such a way that when you speak, people lean in. When you suggest, people consider it. When you lead, people follow willingly. That comes from showing over and over that you mean what you say. When you give advice, it's not because you want to gain something. It's because you've thought it through and you care about the result. When you make promises, you keep them, even when it's inconvenient. People notice. They may not say it out loud, but they store it in their mind. Every little act of honesty, every small moment of integrity, every time you stood firm in the truth adds to the invisible bank of trust. Think about relationships, romantic, professional, or even casual friendships. The strongest ones are not built on excitement, charm, or even skill. They are built on trust. The partner who knows you won't walk away when things get hard. The colleague who knows you won't stab them in the back to get ahead. The friend who knows you won't gossip about them when they're not around. That trust is influence, and here's the key. Once trust is there, you don't have to push people. They give you permission to guide them. They invite your opinion. They ask for your advice. That's silent control. It doesn't look like control at all, but it is the deepest form of it. To build trust, you also need to be real about who you are. People see through fake smiles, fake confidence, and fake promises. They may nod along in the moment, but deep inside, they're already stepping back. On the other hand, when you admit mistakes, when you acknowledge that you're still learning, when you show humility while also holding your ground, people connect with you. They feel that you are human, and that makes them open their guard. Imagine someone in a leadership position who pretends to know everything. They never admit weakness, never show doubt, never acknowledge a flaw. On the surface, that might look strong, but over time it builds distance. People think this person isn't real. I can't fully trust them. Compare that to someone who says, I don't have all the answers, but I will give everything I have to this. That honesty draws people in. That openness creates loyalty. Now you can see why the foundation of silent influence is not clever words or manipulative tactics. It's character, the kind of person you are when nobody is looking, the way you carry yourself when there's nothing to gain. That's the soil where trust grows. And once trust is built, influence becomes effortless. You don't even have to push because people will naturally align with your direction. Another piece of building trust is respect. If you want to influence someone, you must first respect them. People are not projects. They are not tools. They are not stepping stones. They can feel when they are being used, even if you dress it up in fancy language. Respect means you value their time, their effort, their choices, and even their boundaries. When you show respect consistently, people feel safe with you, and safety is the bridge to influence. Think about it. Why do people follow certain leaders into difficult situations? Why do they sacrifice, work harder, or even risk more? Because they trust that leader. They believe that the leader respects them, values them, and won't abandon them when times get rough. That's not manipulation. That's the highest form of influence, built on a foundation that cannot be faked. So here's the key lesson. If you want silent control, first become trustworthy. Keep your word, value people's time, show respect, and let your actions align with your words. Build trust so strong that people can't help but feel drawn to your direction. Influence built this way doesn't need to shout, it doesn't need to force, it doesn't need to trick. It works quietly, powerfully, and consistently. Now, I know you came for psychology tricks, but understand this. There is no psychology stronger than trust. It beats manipulation, it beats fear, it beats charm, because trust stays. When people trust you, they give you a place in their lives. And once you have that place, your influence can last a lifetime. That's the first and most powerful step. Everything else builds on this. Without trust, nothing else matters. With it, you don't even need to push because people will already be moving with you. All right, let's take this principle deeper, because if you truly understand it, you'll see why most people fail at influence and why a small group of people holds such quiet, lasting power over others without ever needing to raise their voice or prove themselves loudly. Trust is built in layers, and every small interaction you have with someone adds or subtracts from that invisible balance. Think of every conversation, every promise, every commitment as a deposit or withdrawal. When you show up on time, when you deliver what you said you would, when you follow through even when it's inconvenient, you're making deposits. When you cancel last minute, when you say one thing and do another, when you make excuses instead of taking responsibility, you're making withdrawals. And the truth is, people are keeping score, even if they don't say it out loud. They may not pull out a notebook and track it, But in their mind, they're forming an opinion about whether you can be trusted. The problem is, most people think trust comes from a single big gesture. They think one act of generosity, one apology, or one kind word erases years of inconsistency. It doesn't. Trust is built in the small things done consistently over time, not in one dramatic moment. That's why so many relationships break down, not because of one major event, but because of 1,000 small cracks that went unnoticed until it was too late. Silent influence means you understand this truth, and you live in a way that constantly reinforces trust in the eyes of others. Consider the leaders who make people feel calm during chaos. Why does their voice carry weight? Because their track record has proven they don't panic, they don't overpromise. They don't abandon their people when it gets tough. People trust them because history has shown they deserve it. That's the silent power you need to build, so that even when you say little, your reputation speaks for you. Think about the way children respond to parents. If a parent always breaks promises, the child learns not to believe their words. No matter how much they love the parent, the trust is gone. But when a parent consistently shows up, when their words and actions align, that child develops a deep trust. That's when guidance feels natural, because the child doesn't question the motive. Adults aren't much different. We may not admit it, but deep down, we follow the same pattern. We trust the people who consistently show us reliability, honesty, and care. Here's another layer: transparency. People respect those who don't hide behind masks. When you share your intentions clearly, when you admit your limitations, when you acknowledge the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, you create trust without even trying. For example, imagine a manager who says, "I don't have all the answers right now, but I'm committed to finding them with you." That honesty builds more trust than pretending to know everything. Why? Because it feels real. People would rather follow someone genuine with flaws than someone who looks polished but feels fake. Now, some might think building trust makes you look weak. They assume that admitting mistakes or being transparent opens the door for others to take advantage of you. The reality is the opposite. When you're real, people drop their guard. They feel comfortable around you. They stop questioning your motive. And that's when your influence becomes stronger, because they aren't resisting you. They're aligning with you naturally. Think about someone you've admired in your own life. Maybe it was a coach who pushed you hard, a boss who held you accountable, or a friend who told you the truth even when it hurt. You trusted them not because they made you comfortable all the time, but because they cared enough to be real. That kind of trust creates a bond so strong that even if you disagreed, you still respected them. Silent control is not about making people happy. It's about building a foundation of trust so solid that even when you push, people lean in instead of walking away. There's also the role of consistency in building trust. If today you're kind, tomorrow you're cruel, and the next day you're unpredictable, people will never feel safe with you. Influence dies in predictability. But when you are steady, when your character shows up the same way no matter the situation, people feel grounded around you. They may not even consciously think about it, but they sense stability, and stability is magnetic. Consider how many relationships, whether in business, family, or friendship, fall apart because of inconsistency. One day the person is supportive, the next day they're absent. One day they promise the world, the next day they disappear. Over time, that inconsistency drains trust completely. Influence isn't built on charm or words. It's built on the consistency of actions that prove you are who you say you are. And here's something most people overlook. Trust requires patience. You can't rush it. You can't demand it. You earn it over time. And the moment you try to speed it up, you break it. That's why manipulative tactics fail. They might create quick results, but they don't last because they bypass trust. Real influence might take longer to build, but once you have it, it stays. Let's also talk about respect for boundaries. If you ignore someone's boundaries, if you push too hard or demand too much, you erode trust instantly. But when you respect their limits, when you show that you value their choice, people lower their defenses. Ironically, by respecting boundaries, you gain more influence because people don't feel threatened. They feel safe giving you access to their thoughts, their decisions, and their emotions. And that's what makes this principle so powerful. Silent control isn't about being louder, smarter, or more dominant. It's about being the one person people know they can count on. It's about showing up in a way that makes others feel safe, valued, and respected. It's about building a track record so solid that people don't even question whether to listen to you. They simply do because they trust you. Imagine walking into a room where everyone is uncertain, confused, or even afraid. If you built a life of trust, the moment you speak, the energy shifts. People listen, not because you demanded it, but because your reputation has already earned their attention. That's silent control in its purest form. The key is to live in a way where your actions do the talking. Words can be doubted. Promises can be broken, but actions that consistently prove your integrity are undeniable. Over time, people stop questioning your motives because they already know your character. And once that happens, influence is no longer something you chase, it's something you embody. So if you want to apply dark psychology in the right way, not manipulation, but deep, lasting influence, start with trust. Build it in every conversation, every action, every promise kept. Make it your foundation, because once trust is established, everything else becomes easier. People will follow your lead, respond to your words, and align with your vision without you ever needing to force it. That's not just silent control, it's the kind of power that lasts for a lifetime. Psychology 2. Add value before you ask. If you want to influence people in a way that feels natural, if you want them to lean towards you instead of pulling away, there's a principle you cannot ignore. Before you ever ask for anything, you must add value first. So, this is one of the most overlooked truths about influence. Yet, it's the one that separates those who constantly struggle for attention from those who command it without force. People respond to those who give them something of worth before asking for something in return. When you bring value, you make yourself unforgettable, and that's when doors begin to open. Think about how most people approach relationships, business, or even friendships. They go in with their hand out, hoping to receive, hoping to get something without ever planting a seed. That approach almost always fails because it creates resistance. Nobody likes to feel used. Nobody enjoys being pulled into a situation where the only goal is to take from them. But when you flip that and focus on what you can contribute first, you change the entire dynamic. Suddenly, people feel drawn to you because you've already proven you're not just there for yourself. Adding value doesn't mean giving away money or resources. It's much deeper than that. Sometimes the value you bring is encouragement. Sometimes it's knowledge. Sometimes it's your time or your effort. It might be as simple as sharing an insight that makes someone's life easier or offering support when they least expect it. The key is to find what matters to the other person and deliver it without keeping score. When people feel you've invested in them without strings attached, they naturally feel compelled to give back. That's how influence works. It flows back to those who first create value. In every interaction, people are silently asking themselves one question: is this person worth my trust and attention? The fastest way to answer that is by showing them you're here to contribute, not just consume. Think about how different the world feels when someone adds something to your day. Maybe a teacher who explained something so clearly that it finally clicked. Maybe a colleague who stayed late to help you finish a project. Maybe a friend who listened without judgment when you needed to talk. Those are moments that stick. Those are the people you never forget. Now, let's bring this to influence. If you want people to follow your lead, if you want them to listen when you speak, if you want them to feel drawn to your vision, you must first establish yourself as someone who adds value to their life. Influence built this way doesn't require persuasion. It happens naturally because people see you as a source of growth, encouragement, or solutions. Look at the people you admire most in your own life. Chances are you admire them not because they demanded it, but because they gave you something meaningful, wisdom, guidance, kindness, or strength. Influence doesn't come from force, it comes from contribution. That's the secret behind lasting control. Adding value also means paying attention. Most people are so focused on themselves that they miss the needs of others. But when you slow down enough to notice what someone else truly values, you put yourself in a position to meet that need. That doesn't just create gratitude, it creates loyalty. People align with those who care about them in real practical ways. The mistake many make is waiting until they need something to suddenly offer value. But by then it feels transactional, like a quick trade. Real influence doesn't come from transactions, it comes from relationships. And relationships are built when value is given long before anything is asked in return. Think about how this applies in business. The best companies in the world don't just sell products. They educate, they serve, they make the customer's life better. That's why customers keep coming back. The principle is the same in your personal life. When you become the person who adds, people don't want to walk away from you because your presence has already proven to be an advantage in their life. And here's something powerful. When you consistently add value, you change your own reputation. People start to see you as someone reliable, someone they want around, someone whose presence improves situations. Over time, your name carries weight, not because you demanded it, but because your actions built it. That's influence that doesn't fade. It grows stronger every time you contribute. Now, understand this. Adding value doesn't mean being a people pleaser or constantly giving to the point of exhaustion. It means being intentional about how you can leave people better than you found them. It's about being strategic, thoughtful, and genuine. Influence isn't about draining yourself. It's about positioning yourself as a source of strength, knowledge, or inspiration. When you bring value first, something shifts in how people see you. They stop putting up walls. They stop questioning your motives. They start to relax because they feel safe with you. And when people feel safe, they open the door to being influenced. That's how silent control works. It isn't about tricks or manipulation. It's about creating a pull so strong that people naturally want to align with you. Imagine if every time you entered a conversation, your goal wasn't to win, but to give. Imagine if your reputation became the person who makes everything better. How much easier would influence become? How much more respect would you gain? How much stronger would your relationships be? That's the essence of this principle. You add first, and in return, you gain the kind of influence that doesn't fade with time. Adding value before you ask is not just a strategy, it's a way of living. It's choosing to approach every relationship with the mindset of a giver, knowing that influence doesn't come from taking, it comes from serving. And when you live this way, you'll notice something remarkable. People start giving back to you, not because you demanded it, but because they want to. That's real control. That's the silent kind of power that changes everything. Adding value before you ask for something in return is one of the most powerful principles in life and business. Too many people want shortcuts. They want to take before they give. They want opportunities, favors, or recognition, but they forget the universal law: value flows to those who create it. When you lead with service, when you focus first on helping, solving, and contributing, doors open that no amount of asking, begging, or demanding could ever open for you. Think about the relationships you admire most. Aren't they built on a foundation of mutual respect, trust, and contribution? The people you remember, the ones who stand out, are not the ones who constantly asked for something, but the ones who offered something meaningful. It could be encouragement, knowledge, resources, or even just time and attention. Whatever it was, it created a bond. That's how influence is built. That's how opportunities come. Imagine walking into a room of successful people. Most will be cautious guarding their time because they're used to others approaching with only one agenda: talk to take. Now picture yourself as the one person who flips that script. Instead of asking, "What can you do for me?" you ask, "What can I do for you? How can I make your life easier, your goals more achievable?" That question alone separates you from the crowd. It signals that you're not here to drain, but to contribute. And when people feel that from you, they naturally want to reciprocate. This principle works everywhere. In friendships, you add value by showing loyalty and presence, not just appearing when it's convenient. In business, you add value by over-delivering, profiting more than what was paid for. In leadership, you add value by serving your team, giving them the tools and belief to rise higher. In family, you add value by carrying responsibility, not just expecting others to carry you. Everywhere you go, the one who brings value earns trust, and with trust comes influence. It's also important to understand that value doesn't have to be big or flashy. Some people think, what do I have to give? I'm not rich, I don't have connections, but value is not always money. It can be your attention in a distracted world. It can be encouragement in a time of doubt. It can be the effort to share a resource, recommend a book, or teach a skill. It can be simply following through on your promises when others don't. Consistency itself is value. Reliability itself is. Now think about what happens when you live by this rule consistently. Over time, people begin to associate your name with contribution. When your name comes up in conversations, others say, that person is always helpful, always dependable. That reputation is priceless. It follows you into rooms you've never entered, into opportunities you didn't even know existed. Suddenly, people want to invite you in, recommend you, include you, because they know you won't just take, you'll multiply what you're given. The opposite is also true. If you become known as someone who only asks, only takes, only shows up when there's something to gain, doors close. Your name gets mentioned with caution. People hesitate to connect with you because they know it's always one-sided. That's why the discipline of adding value first is so important. It builds a long-term reputation of abundance. And here's the beauty. When you add value, it always comes back. Not always directly, not always from the same person, but the principle is universal. What you sow, you reap. Help enough people get what they want, and eventually, you'll find yourself surrounded by people eager to help you get what you want. It's not luck, it's not coincidence, it's cause and effect. So the next time you're about to ask for something, pause. Ask yourself, have I added enough value first? Have I made myself someone worth investing in, worth trusting, worth supporting? If the answer is no, then shift your focus. Build a habit of giving first, planting seeds everywhere you go, because one day, those seeds will turn into trees that shade and feed you. This is how you build influence. This is how you earn respect. This is how you create opportunities that others spend their whole lives chasing. Add value before you ask. Psychology 3, speak clearly and listen deeply. Speaking clearly and listening deeply is one of the most underrated but powerful skills you can ever develop. Many people think success is only about working harder, earning more, or chasing bigger opportunities. But in reality, how you communicate, how you deliver your words, and how you receive others' words often determines the doors that open for you and the relationships that sustain you. Clarity in speech is not about using fancy words or sounding overly sophisticated. It's about being simple, direct, and truthful. When you speak clearly, people don't have to guess your meaning. They don't walk away confused. They walk away knowing exactly where you stand and what you mean. Think about leaders you admire. They don't bury their ideas under complicated jargon. They strip away the unnecessary, and what's left is sharp, powerful, and memorable. That's the strength of clear speech. It leaves no doubt, but speaking clearly is only half the equation. The other half is listening deeply. Most people only listen halfway. They nod, they wait for their turn to speak, but they don't actually hear. Deep listening means silencing your own inner chatter long enough to fully understand another person's words, tone, and even what's left unsaid. When you listen this way, people feel valued, they feel respected, they feel like their voice matters, and that is a rare gift in today's noisy world. Clarity in speech combined with depth in listening makes you powerful in any setting. In business, it helps you avoid misunderstandings and build trust quickly. In relationships, it helps you connect at a deeper level, strengthening bonds that last. In leadership, it helps you inspire and guide others because people know you don't just talk. You also hear. If you want to test your strength in this rule, try this. After every conversation, ask yourself, did I make my words clear enough to be remembered? And did I listen deeply enough to understand, not just reply? That simple reflection can transform the way you interact with the world. Because here's the truth, people don't follow those who talk the most, they follow those who communicate the clearest. And people don't trust those who speak loudly, they trust those who listen deeply. This rule is the foundation of influence. It's the glue of relationships. It's the compass of leadership. Speak clearly and listen deeply, and watch how people begin to lean in when you talk and open up when you're silent. When you really look at it, the way a person speaks and listens is the mirror of their character. If your words are clouded, rushed, or careless, it gives people the impression that your mind is the same. If you don't give others the patience of listening, they feel dismissed, even if that was never your intention. But if you slow down enough to craft your words with precision, and if you make the effort to listen as though the other person's words are treasures, everything about how people see you begins to shift. They feel your presence. They sense that you carry weight. They begin to trust your voice because it reflects both clarity and care. Clarity is not just about being understood, it's about being remembered. The reason some speeches, some lessons, some instructions stick with people for years isn't because they were long or complicated or wrapped in clever phrasing. It's because they were delivered with such simplicity that they struck straight to the heart. Clear words cut through noise like a sharp blade. Think about the difference between saying, work on maximizing productivity through effective strategies of time allocation, saying, don't waste time. The second is powerful because it's plain. The person who speaks that way wins attention because they're not trying to impress. They're trying to express. And then comes listening. Listening deeply isn't passive. It's an active choice to honor the other person. It's leaning in, making eye contact, allowing pauses, nodding with genuine attention, and noticing what they are saying beyond their words. Many people never experience this kind of listening in their lives. They go through years feeling unheard, overlooked, or rushed. But when you become the rare person who listens with patience and depth, people are drawn to you. They start to open up more than they ever did. They trust you, and trust is the seed of influence. In business, this ability is priceless. Deals are lost not because people disagreed, but because they misunderstood each other. Leaders fail not because they lacked vision, but because they didn't listen to the voices on the ground. Families break not because love disappeared, but because no one was really hearing one another. Speaking clearly and listening deeply prevents these cracks from forming. It builds bridges instead of walls. One of the mistakes people make is believing that if they talk more, they will control the situation. But control doesn't come from flooding the room with words. It comes from choosing words wisely and then giving silence its proper place so you can listen fully. Some of the most powerful leaders say the least in a room, but when they do speak, it lands. Why? Because their clarity makes their words impossible to ignore, and their silence shows that they value the voices around them. If you want to grow influence, train yourself in this skill every single day. When you talk to someone, practice simplifying your ideas until they can be understood without effort. That doesn't mean dumbing things down. It means making them sharp, easy, and memorable. When you listen to someone, give them your full attention. Don't rush. Don't plan your next response while they're still talking. Give them the respect of your focus. This rule also protects you. Many people get lost in arguments, conflicts, and broken relationships because they didn't stop to clarify their own words or fully hear the other side. Miscommunication is the enemy of trust, but if you master clear speaking and deep listening, you rise above confusion. You create understanding where others create friction. And notice this, people naturally follow those who understand them. Not those who lecture, not those who dominate, but those who make them feel heard. When you combine that with clear speech that inspires and directs, you become a force people willingly follow. It doesn't matter if you're speaking to one person or to 1,000. The principle is the same. When you speak, remove the clutter. When you listen, remove the noise inside your own head. That's how you create conversations that matter. That's how you build influence without forcing it. Over time, if you practice this, you'll notice a shift. People will start repeating your words because they're so clear, they stick. People will start seeking you out because your listening makes them feel respected. You'll no longer have to push for influence. It will come to you silently as a natural reward of the way you communicate. This is the hidden strength behind speaking clearly and listening deeply. It's not flashy, it's not loud, but it's unforgettable. And in a world drowning in noise, the person who can master this rule will always stand out. Psychology 4, led by example. When people are searching for direction, they rarely follow the one who shouts the loudest. They follow the one who moves first. Influence is not something you announce, it's something you demonstrate. The moment your actions begin to align with the principles you speak about, you earn a kind of authority that words alone can never create. This is what it means to lead by example. It's not about holding a title, wearing a badge, or standing at the front of a room. It's about living in a way that others cannot help but notice and respect. Every time you make a choice, you are setting an example. People are watching how you handle stress, how you treat others, how you react when life doesn't go your way. They are watching whether your talk about discipline shows up in your schedule, whether your words about respect show up in your relationships, whether your promises about growth show up in your daily habits. You cannot hide from this truth. People copy what they see more than what they hear. If your actions are strong, your influence will naturally expand. If your actions are weak, no amount of words will save your credibility. The reason leading by example is so powerful is because it eliminates doubt. Anyone can say they are committed, but when you see it in their lifestyle, the proof is undeniable. Think of someone you admire. Chances are, it's not only because of what they said, but because they lived out their words. They kept going when others quit. They showed up when no one expected them to. They carried themselves with discipline when it was inconvenient. That's what makes their influence so enduring. Leading by example also creates silent permission for others to rise. If you live with integrity, those around you feel challenged to do the same. If you show consistency, others begin to value consistency. If you work hard without excuses, the people near you feel guilty, bringing excuses of their own. Your behavior lifts the standards of the whole environment. That's why in every team, family, or community, one person's actions can shift the culture more than 100 speeches ever could. But leading by example also requires sacrifice. It's easy to give instructions from a distance. It's harder to live them yourself when the spotlight isn't on. People who lead by example don't just perform when others are looking. They stay true even in private. They choose discipline when no one is checking. They keep their word when breaking it would be easier. They honor their values when compromise would bring faster results. This hidden strength is what eventually shines the brightest. Think of it in daily life. A parent can lecture a child about honesty, but if that parent lies on small matters, the child learns lying is acceptable. A boss can demand a punctuality, but if that boss strolls in late, employees will never take punctuality seriously. A friend can talk about loyalty, but if that friend disappears in times of need, their words mean nothing. The reverse is also true. When a parent consistently models honesty, children grow up valuing truth. When a leader sets the standard by arriving early and prepared, the team naturally aligns. When a friend shows up in difficult moments, loyalty is proven without words. The secret is that people often rise or fall to the level of the example set before them. That's why the weight of leadership is so heavy. Your example shapes not only your own destiny, but the destiny of those who look up to you. If you carry yourself with discipline, courage, and humility, others will feel pulled to live the same way. If you cut corners and chase comfort, they will feel justified in doing the same. The beautiful part is that you don't need to be perfect to lead by example. You just need to be real. People are inspired not by flawless lives, but by consistent effort. They don't need you to never fall. They need to see you rise every time you do. They don't need you to avoid mistakes. They need to see you take responsibility when mistakes happen. Authenticity builds more respect than pretending to be without flaws. Over time, this way of living begins to attract opportunities you never chased. People recommend your name when you're not in the room. They invite you into projects, partnerships, and friendships, not because you asked, but because your example made you trustworthy. You start to notice that influence flows to you naturally without manipulation. That's the silent reward of leading by example. It draws loyalty, respect, and influence that cannot be faked. If you truly want to control situations silently, if you want to move people without force, this is the way. Live in such a way that your example speaks before you open your mouth. Make sure that when people describe you, they can't help but point to your actions. Be the one who shows up. Be the one who follows through. Be the one who proves with discipline what others only talk about. When this becomes your way of living, you no longer need to demand influence. It arrives uninvited. People follow those whose example they cannot deny. And when you walk this path, you discover that the strongest form of silent control is not in what you say, but in what you consistently do. The weight of leading by example is heavier than most people are willing to carry, but it is also the most rewarding. When you live your values, when you show up with integrity day after day, you become a reference point in the lives of others. People may not always tell you they are watching, but silently they are measuring themselves against you. They notice how you work, how you respond, how you handle setbacks, and they adjust their own choices because of what they see in you. That is power, not the kind that comes from shouting orders or trying to dominate, but the kind that grows silently and spreads without effort. Imagine working in an environment where everyone cuts corners, where excuses are the language of the day, and mediocrity is the standard. Then one person decides to stand tall, to arrive on time, to give their best, even when no one is clapping, to keep their word, even when it costs them something. At first, people may mock that person, calling them too serious or too rigid, but as time goes on, the contrast becomes undeniable. While others are stuck at the same level, that person begins to rise. Their consistency earns respect. Their standards create. Eventually, others start following, not because they were forced, but because the example made them uncomfortable with their own excuses. That is how one life can shift an entire culture. True leadership by example means you no longer hide behind talk. If you tell someone discipline is important, they should see it in your routine. If you say health matters, they should see it in your choices. If you talk about growth, they should see it in your study and practice. Without action, words are just decoration. With action, words become truth. And when people see truth lived out, it has a magnetic pull on them. This way of living does not mean you will not struggle. In fact, leading by example will often demand that you step into challenges others avoid. You may be the first to try something new, the first to stand for what's right, sacrifice comfort for growth. Others may hesitate, waiting to see if it can be done. But once you walk the path, you make it easier for them to follow. Your courage creates a trail for others to walk. That's why the world needs more people who live their values instead of just preaching them. Think about history. Every movement, every shift, every transformation was sparked not by words alone, but by examples. The ones who changed the direction of communities, businesses, or even entire nations were those who lived differently. They didn't sit back and describe change, they embodied it. And when people saw them endure, commit, and follow through, they felt inspired to rise as well. That is the legacy of those who lead by example. They leave footprints others can step into. In your personal life, this principle is just as powerful. If you want respect in your family, don't demand it. Earn it by showing respect first. If you want loyalty from your friends, give loyalty when it costs you something. If you want excellence from your team, show them what excellence looks like in your own performance. Influence works like a mirror. People reflect back what they see. When you provide a strong example, they have something solid to reflect. When your example is weak, they have no standard to rise to. One of the hardest parts of leading by example is consistency when no one is watching. It is easy to do the right thing when you know someone will notice. It is harder to do it in the quiet, unseen hours. But that is where character is built. The person who trains in the dark shines in the light. The one who disciplines themselves in private eventually stands out in public. If you only live your values when it's convenient, you are not leading. You are performing. True leadership by example happens when your actions remain the same regardless of who is around. Over time, this way of living transforms you from the inside out. You begin to trust yourself because you no longer betray your own words. You develop a quiet confidence that does not depend on applause. So quick, because you know you are living true to your values. That confidence radiates. Others feel it. They are drawn to it. And they begin to align themselves with you because your example gives them something to believe in. And here's the truth. People are starving for examples. They are tired of empty words, tired of promises that never turn into action, tired of leaders who demand what they don't live. When you choose to be different, you stand out. You become rare. You become someone whose influence does not need to be announced because it is obvious in your life. The control you gain from leading by example is not loud or forceful. It is silent, but it is powerful. People will think twice before letting you down because your example raises the bar. They will work harder in your presence because your consistency challenges their laziness. They will treat others with more respect because your respect leaves them no excuse. This is influence at its highest level, earned, not demanded. You don't need to manipulate, you don't need to push, and you don't need to scheme. You simply live in alignment with the standards you expect from others. And over time, people fall into step with your example. They may resist at first, but eventually they cannot deny the strength of what you represent. So if you want to move people, start with yourself. If you want respect, show respect. If you want commitment, live committed. If you want excellence, practice excellence every day. Over weeks, months, and years, you will notice the world around you adjusting to the example you set. That is silent control. That is influence without force. That is leadership at its most powerful form. When you commit to leading by example, you create a standard that people cannot ignore. It is not about being perfect. Nobody expects perfection. It is about showing up consistently, making decisions based on principle, and acting in ways that reflect the person you want others to become. Imagine a team where the leader shows up late, misses deadlines, and complains constantly. The team's energy will mirror that behavior. Now imagine a leader who arrives early, meets commitments, and maintains a positive, solution-focused attitude. The entire dynamic of the group changes. Without saying a single word, the leader has set a standard that others begin to follow. And that standard eventually becomes the norm. This is how influence works when it is rooted in action rather than empty commands. The challenge lies in staying committed when there is no immediate recognition. Most people give up when they do not see results right away. They expect others to notice and validate their effort. But leadership by example is not about approval. It is about consistency in doing what is right, regardless of who is watching. When you live this way, you develop a quiet power that others sense instinctively. People may not always articulate it, but they respect and follow it because it is authentic and undeniable. One of the most powerful aspects of leading by example is its ripple effect. Your actions influence those around you, and their actions influence others, creating a chain reaction that extends far beyond what you can see. When you act with integrity in your personal relationships, your family learns responsibility and respect. When you work diligently and ethically, your colleagues begin to elevate their own performance. When you demonstrate patience, humility, and resilience, the people around you start to internalize these qualities. Your life becomes a living lesson, a practical blueprint for others to follow. This principle works in every area of life. In business, if you want your team to deliver exceptional results, you must deliver exceptional effort first. In health, if you want others to value wellness, you must prioritize it in your own routine. In education, if you want to inspire learning, you must model curiosity and discipline. People do not just respond to instructions, they respond to what they observe. Your example communicates more than words ever can. It is also important to understand the timing of influence. Leading by example is often a slow and subtle process. It does not create instant results, but over time it builds deep and lasting impact. The small, consistent choices you make every day accumulate, and before you know it, you have set a standard that others aspire to. What may seem insignificant in the moment, arriving early, completing a task thoroughly, maintaining composure under stress, becomes part of the fabric of your influence. Over months and years, these small actions solidify into a reputation for excellence that speaks louder than any speech or lecture. The mindset required for this approach is one of patience, self-awareness, and unwavering commitment to personal values. You must be willing to do what is right, even when it is hard, even when no one is watching, and even when it is inconvenient. This requires self-discipline because temptation and shortcuts will always be present. But discipline is the bridge between intention and impact. When you combine discipline with the clarity of purpose, you create a force that draws people to you naturally. Another aspect to consider is vulnerability. Leading by example does not mean hiding your mistakes or pretending to be flawless. In fact, being transparent about your failures and how you recover from them strengthens your influence. People respect authenticity. When they see you handle setbacks with grace, accountability, and determination, they learn how to navigate challenges themselves. The way you respond in difficult moments teaches far more than your words ever could. Your environment is shaped by the standard you set. If you tolerate mediocrity in yourself, others will mirror that tolerance. If you uphold high standards, people will rise to meet them. This is a powerful insight. Change begins with you. You cannot control every decision others make, but you can control how you live. By consistently modeling the behavior you expect from others, you create conditions that naturally encourage them to improve. Influence in this form is sustainable because it is grounded in reality, not manipulation. Consider the power of subtle influence. You do not need to force compliance or issue commands to make an impact. Quiet, consistent actions communicate a clear message. When others observe that your word matches your actions, trust grows. Trust is the foundation of respect, collaboration, and loyalty. And trust is earned not through slogans, promises, or charisma, but through daily demonstration of principles. Your credibility increases because people see that you do what you say, and they are more likely to follow, support, and emulate your approach. It is also worth noting that leading by example strengthens your own character. As you hold yourself accountable to high standards, you reinforce habits of discipline, integrity, and focus. Each day becomes an opportunity to solidify the person you want to be. Your actions shape your identity, and your identity becomes the source of lasting influence. You do not merely teach others by example, you also teach yourself. Every time you rise to a challenge, resist a shortcut, or maintain your principles, you reinforce your own capability and resilience. In practical terms, this means examining your daily routines and behaviors. Ask yourself, what do people see in me? Am I demonstrating the qualities I want others to embody? Am I consistent, reliable, and intentional in my choices? Are my actions aligned with the message I want to communicate? By answering these questions, honestly, you identify areas for growth and begin to refine the example you set. Each adjustment, no matter how small, contributes to a stronger, more influential presence. Ultimately, leading by example is about living intentionally. It requires commitment, courage, and a willingness to be accountable. It is not a strategy for instant gratification. It is a lifelong practice that produces exponential results over time. Those who embrace this approach become magnets for respect, loyalty, and influence. Their impact extends beyond what they can measure because their life itself, is a testament to what is possible when principles guide action. Psychology 5, ask better questions, not commands. When you approach interactions with questions rather than commands, you shift the energy of communication entirely. Commands assume authority and often trigger resistance, even when your intention is good. Questions, on the other hand, engage the mind, invite participation, and create ownership in the decision-making process. When people feel that they have a role in shaping the outcome, they are more invested in the result. Asking the right questions guides others subtly but powerfully without creating resentment or conflict. It starts with listening closely. A question is effective only when it arises from genuine understanding. Observe, pay attention to what is said and what is left unsaid, and notice the context of the situation. The deeper your awareness, the more precise your questions can be. Instead of telling someone what to do, you invite them to think, explore, and arrive at their own conclusions, guided by your framing. This is not manipulation, it is influence through clarity and engagement. The way you frame questions matters. Open-ended questions that encourage reflection and problem solving create a sense of autonomy and responsibility. When you ask someone, "What do you think would be the best way to approach this?" Or, "How would you handle this challenge if you were in charge?" you stimulate critical thinking and creativity. People respond more readily to challenges framed as opportunities rather than orders to follow. The difference is subtle, yet it completely changes the dynamic. Consistency is essential. Asking good questions once or twice is not enough. It must become a habit, part of how you interact with others. Over time, people begin to anticipate your questions and internalize your perspective, right? This is where influence is built quietly, without force. The questions you ask shape thinking patterns, priorities, and problem-solving approaches. They help create alignment without overt instruction, and they reinforce a culture of collaboration and accountability. Questions also allow you to discover underlying motivations, concerns, and values. When you understand what drives a person, your questions can guide them toward productive action that aligns with both their goals and the larger objectives you want to achieve together. This approach reduces friction, builds rapport, and encourages commitment. People naturally follow those who help them see a path clearly, rather than pushing them down a path they do not own. Another critical element is timing. The most powerful questions are asked at the right moment when the other person is receptive and open. Observing energy, mood, and readiness ensures that your inquiry is effective. Questions asked at the wrong time may be ignored, resisted, or dismissed. Understanding timing and context sharpens your influence because it shows respect for the other person's perspective and enhances your credibility. It is also essential to combine questions with patience. People may not immediately respond with insight or action. Give them space to think, reflect, and experiment. Your questions are seeds that may take time to grow. By allowing this natural development, you create sustainable influence that lasts far longer than any command ever could. Impatience can undermine your efforts because it signals pressure rather than guidance. Incorporating curiosity into your questions is a subtle yet powerful tool. Genuine curiosity communicates interest and care. When someone senses that you truly want to understand their perspective, they are more likely to open up, share ideas, and engage meaningfully. Questions framed from a place of authentic curiosity build trust, strengthen relationships, and increase your ability to guide outcomes effectively. It is important to recognize that asking better questions is not about being manipulative. It is about creating a conversation in which all parties think critically, explore options, and feel empowered. The subtle control comes from guiding thought, not dictating action. You lead through insight rather than authority, influence rather than force. This approach fosters long-term collaboration, loyalty, and respect. Finally, asking better questions requires reflection and learning on your part. Observe which questions produce clarity and engagement, which ones inspire action, and which ones fall flat. Refine your approach continuously. Over time, you develop an instinct for asking the exact question that unlocks thinking, opens perspective, and creates momentum. This skill transforms interactions into opportunities for influence, growth, and alignment. When applied consistently, this approach quietly shifts dynamics in your favor. People become more cooperative, focused, and responsible because they feel ownership in decisions and outcomes. Your influence spreads naturally, subtly, and sustainably because it is built on respect, insight, and engagement. Asking the right questions empowers others while positioning you as a leader whose guidance is sought rather than imposed. Every interaction you have is an opportunity to influence, to guide, and to inspire action. Asking better questions rather than issuing commands fundamentally changes the dynamic of human connection. It shifts the energy from control to collaboration. When you pose a question, you invite thought, you spark reflection, and you give people the power to contribute to the solution. This approach transforms relationships, making them more productive, more cooperative, and more meaningful. People respond to this kind of leadership because it respects their intelligence and their autonomy. The key is to focus on questions that reveal insight. Instead of telling someone, "Do this," you might ask, "How would you approach this challenge if success depended on it?" This simple shift prompts reflection and creativity. It activates problem-solving skills that might otherwise lie dormant. It allows people to take ownership of their actions and outcomes, which is far more powerful than compliance driven by obligation. The ownership they feel creates motivation that no command can achieve. It is crucial to understand the balance between asking and listening. The real power of a question lies not only in its phrasing, but in the attentiveness of the listener. When you ask a question, listen intently to the answer. Engage with it, probe deeper, and respond with curiosity rather than judgment. Your listening validates the other person's thoughts and shows that their perspective matters. This builds trust and opens the door for more honest, open communication. Influence grows naturally when people feel heard and understood. Asking questions also allows you to uncover hidden obstacles that might be preventing progress. A well-framed question can reveal doubts, fears, or misunderstandings that would never surface under commands. For example, asking, "What is standing in the way of your success here?" allows someone to articulate challenges they might otherwise hide. Once those obstacles are revealed, solutions become possible. Your guidance then becomes relevant, precise, and effective. The subtle power of questions comes from their ability to guide thought without forcing action. People are more likely to follow a path they helped design, even if they were subtly guided along the way. You become a facilitator of insight rather than a dictator of behavior. This approach strengthens relationships because it respects individual autonomy while directing energy towards shared goals. Your influence is sustained because it is built on engagement rather than compliance. It is also important to ask questions that encourage accountability. Questions like, "What steps will you take to ensure this happens?" or "How will you measure your progress?" Push individuals to commit to action while still feeling in control of the process. Accountability questions create responsibility and focus, but they do so in a way that invites collaboration rather than enforcing obedience. This method strengthens self-discipline and encourages initiative. Timing plays a critical role in the effectiveness of questions. Observing the right moment to ask can dramatically change the outcome. Questions posed when someone is stressed or distracted may be ignored or misinterpreted. Waiting until the person is receptive ensures engagement and thoughtful responses. Timing, combined with empathy and observation, ensures your questions have maximum impact. Another dimension is the use of reflective questions. These encourage introspection and long-term thinking. Questions like, "How does this decision align with your goals?" or "What would happen if you tried a different approach?" promote self-awareness and strategic thinking. When people are prompted to think critically about their own decisions, they develop judgment and insight that are far more lasting than simple instructions. The quality of your questions directly affects the results you get. Open-ended questions that demand analysis, evaluation, and creativity produce far more engagement than closed-ended questions that result in yes or no answers. Asking meaningful questions stimulates thought and action simultaneously. People naturally gravitate toward those who challenge them to think, reflect, and improve. This is the foundation of quiet influence and long-term leadership. It is equally important to maintain consistency in asking questions. One or two strategic questions may not be enough to shape behavior or mindset. Repeated, well-timed, insightful questions build habits of thought and reinforce patterns of engagement. Over time, the people you interact with begin to internalize your approach, thinking through solutions before you even ask. Influence becomes embedded in behavior and decision-making. Curiosity is the engine behind all effective questioning. When your questions are genuine, they communicate interest, care, and respect. People respond better to curiosity than to authority. Questions framed from a place of authentic interest build trust, strengthen connections, and open pathways for collaboration. Curiosity also signals that you value the other person's ideas and abilities, which encourages participation and engagement. The subtle art of asking better questions also lies in guiding without controlling. Your questions should illuminate options, clarify goals, and encourage reflection. They should never be manipulative or forceful. Influence grows naturally when others feel ownership over their decisions and outcomes. By asking thoughtful, strategic questions, you create an environment where people are engaged, motivated, and empowered. Patience is critical in this process. People may not immediately act or respond as you hope. Allow them time to think, experiment, and discover. The questions you ask plant seeds of insight that grow over time. Pressure and urgency can undermine your efforts, while patience nurtures long-term results. The quiet, steady influence of well-placed questions produces outcomes that are lasting and meaningful. Over time, consistently asking insightful questions builds a culture of engagement. People begin to expect thoughtful questions and reflect before responding. They develop problem-solving skills, initiative, and responsibility. Your influence expands without force because the people you guide internalize your methods. So, the shift from commands to questions fosters collaboration, accountability, and growth. The practice of asking better questions also sharpens your own thinking. You become more observant, more strategic, and more empathetic. Asking questions requires awareness of context, energy, and motivation. It forces you to think critically about the outcomes you want to achieve and how to guide others toward them. Your influence is amplified because it is grounded in understanding, insight, and respect. Ultimately, asking better questions rather than giving commands is a powerful way to lead. It transforms interactions from transactional to transformational. People become more engaged, more responsible, and more aligned with shared goals. Influence is no longer imposed. It is earned through respect, insight, and guidance. By asking the right questions, you create ownership, stimulate growth, and achieve results that last. When applied consistently, this principle can quietly shape teams, relationships, and communities. People learn to think critically, act responsibly, and innovate creatively. They follow your guidance willingly because it feels like their own, not imposed from outside. Questions create an ecosystem of empowerment where everyone grows, contributes, and succeeds. Influence becomes a natural byproduct of respect, engagement, and thoughtful inquiry. This approach requires practice, reflection, and patience, but the rewards are profound. The ability to guide thought, encourage action, and inspire responsibility without force is the hallmark of true leadership. Asking better questions positions you as a thoughtful, respected, and effective leader whose influence is felt deeply, quietly, and persistently. When you embrace this mindset fully, every conversation becomes an opportunity to guide, teach, and inspire. The results compound over time. People not only act, they think, they grow, and they internalize the lessons you are teaching. Your influence expands naturally, silently, and powerfully. Asking better questions is not just a technique. It is a way to transform relationships, teams, and your own capacity to lead effectively. Every step you take to guide, influence, and inspire others begins with your own awareness and intention. True control is not about forcing people to act. It is about creating conditions where they choose to act wisely, responsibly, and effectively. When you build trust, provide value, listen deeply, led by example, and ask thoughtful questions, you are planting seeds of growth that will flourish quietly and powerfully. Influence becomes natural, lasting, and respected because it comes from understanding, empathy, and strategic guidance, rather than coercion. The greatest power is not in commanding others. It is in shaping environments, conversations, and relationships in ways that cultivate responsibility, insight, and positive action. Every interaction is an opportunity to reinforce this, leaving a legacy of influence that works silently but profoundly, transforming both the people around you and your own capacity to lead.